The Fire Knight's Greatsword is the highest damage DLC weapon I've made a build for so far. It feels unreal the amount of fire damage we can burn the bad guys with by only using a good loadout, 2 tiers, and 2 incantation buffs. This is the first random drop weapon we've covered from the DLC. I farmed this weapon starting from the storehouse first floor site of Grace. Turn around and go back down the elevator. There you'll find a Fire Knight wielding the weapon with his back towards you. Farm him for a while, and you'll have your Greatsword in no time. The Fire Knight's Greatsword is a colossal sword with a slightly different moveset. The R1 attacks are heavy but dexterous diagonal cuts. Instead of the standard horizontal swipes you find on many other colossal swords, the R1s are great, but we want to use our R2 attacks as much as possible. These R2 attacks may be slow, but they put out some of the highest poise damage you'll find in the whole game. The Ash of War we slap on this weapon is truly what brings this build together. Flame Spear is dropped by that final Fire Knight before we get to fight Mesmer. This move thrusts our huge sword forward, spitting out a flaming projectile. Both the projectile and the thrust can deal damage. Landing both of them on your target can easily see over 4,000 damage per hit. The Ash coats our sword in Mesmer fire for a small time after use, giving us even more damage with our R1s and R2s. The outright obscene damage means we want to focus on Ash of War use. Thanks to a few new items in the DLC, there are multiple avenues we can take to make this already powerful move even better. I didn't build specifically around this incantation, but Mesmer's Orb benefits from many of the same buffs as Flame Spear, so I used it effectively in a few fights throughout the run. Just be sure to use the Fire Knight seal to boost its power. Before we get into talismans and the like, this is usually where I talk about our year-end subscriber goal. The thing is, we ended up passing that goal last week, so huge thanks to everyone to help us get there so far ahead of schedule. Our build setup starts with a Flame Art Infusion. This gives us an AR boost when we level our Faith. That will tie our fire damage scaling into our investment in that stat. Next, we want to wear the Winged Serpent Helm, since this will boost the power of Mesmer Ashes of War. We have 2 stacking incantations. They are Golden Vow and Howl of Shabriri for a great overall damage boost. Then be sure to use the Flame Shroud and Cracked tier to boost our fire damage by 20%, and Bloodsuck and Cracked tier to boost all damage by 20%. Our talismans for the build were the 2-headed turtle talisman for the best stamina regen, Fire Scorpion Charm for more fire damage, Godfrey's Icon because Flame Spear is a charged Ash of War, and the ever wonderful Shard of Alexander for 15% more damage with Flame Spear. This is perhaps the most involved build I've made yet, so let's add more to it. There are bosses that have a high fire resistance and are not nice to be very squishy around. So let's take this build and modify it into a tanky colossal sword user that focuses on R1 and R2 attacks instead of the Ash of War. Switch out the Bloodsuck and Cracked tier for the Opaline Heart tier, use Flame Grant Me Strength instead of Howl of Shabriri, and swap out the last 3 talismans for the Dragon Crest Great Shield for more defense, 2-handed Sword Talisman for 15% more damage, and the Axe Talisman for more damage with our charged R2s. This defensive loadout won't do as much damage, but it is significantly harder to kill than the first loadout. For our stats at RL 170, we had 60 Vigor, 30 Mind, 35 Endurance, 22 Strength to use the weapon in one hand if need be, 18 Dexterity, and 68 Faith for our weapon damage and incantations. With every new weapon I use in this DLC, there is a new fun and effective way I find to beat this game. There are still dozens of cool weapons I've yet to look into, so be sure to stay tuned for more new weapons, and even some updated runs on some old videos.